We're excited to be here for this month's Coaching Herd Champion of the Month conversation. We're really excited to spotlight Christine Feehan. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
Good. And the meaningful work she's leading throughout the World Women's Snowboard Organization, otherwise known as the WWSO. She brings a really unique perspective across coaching, media, international sports leadership, and she's been a strong voice for creating more opportunities and better systems for women in sport. And she's just back from Italy, where she served as the senior venue management role during, well, I can't even say that, Milano Cortina 2026 Olympic Winter Games. So welcome back. How was it?
It was intense, but opportunity of a lifetime. I would highly recommend if anyone ever has the chance to work on an Olympic Games or even volunteer. We always need more volunteers, and you have the time to do it. Definitely put yourself in that position. Take the chance. You will learn more than you ever imagined in a very condensed period of time.
That's awesome. I should think about that because I really want to go to LA. All right. So a little bit about you. You've had such a unique path. You've coaching, media, international sports ops, leadership throughout the WWSO. When you look across all those roles, what have they taught you about what girls and women need in order to stay and thrive in sport?
Yeah, so I have worked in ski sport and then also in corporate from every conceivable angle. I'm really curious in nature, and I just want to know as much about every ecosystem that I can possibly know that I'm operating in. And I have played like all the sports. Okay, not all of them, but I've been on teams or competed individually in soccer, cycling, ice hockey, obviously ski racing. And then a fun fact that resurfaced just in Milano Cortina is that I also luged in Lake Placid for what qualifies as like a split second at this point in my life. But yeah, when I was a kid, gave that a try too in the sliding track. And the girls and the women who I see that are really thriving in sport, they all have a personal reason to be there that is surpassing the results. And I think that it's our job as coaches and as program leaders to learn what those reasons are and to help develop those in our athletes and in our clubs.
Yeah. And so if building on that, since you've just returned from the Olympics, what did that experience reinforce for you about these kinds of environments and what their meaning is that they're there, the leadership that you see around them, the support systems that you see around them for them to perform at their best?
Yeah, when we're talking Olympics, pressure and expectations are a big one. And if we could find a way to mute those or never even introduce them to the sport landscape in the first place, then I think we would see more girls and women really shine in sport. There is a noticeable way that a lot of female athletes show up in high pressure situations, and that is to seek perfection within themselves. And at the Olympics, like we gave out medals for very beautiful but very imperfect performances. And I think that I won't say all, but many of their male counterparts find it at least a little bit easier to roll with the punches and to carry on in imperfect ways. And that is a really important skill to develop in order to be able to perform at your best in these high performance and high pressure environments.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And then if you think about what you saw at the Olympic level, so where do you think that connection happens at the grassroots level when we're talking about all those young girls that are playing, or we're trying to get to play, or we're trying to get not to quit? Where does that fit in at the grassroots level?
You're going to laugh, but some of the athletes that I had the privilege to coach as juniors, like many, many, many moons ago, were competing at these games. So for me, there was a very direct connection between the grassroots level and where sport can take you in life if you stay in it long enough and if we have programs that can keep girls active long enough. And there was also this really cool link between past NCAA skiers who then went on to win medals at these games. And skiing is not necessarily considered a feeder program from NCAA to the professional level, unlike in some other sports, of course. So that really serves as an inspiration to athletes and coaches and clubs not to put preconceived limits on anyone based on their age or their pace of progression. So the connection that I see from grassroots to Olympic is much like what coaching her is trying to do, is just keep the girls in sport long enough so that they can develop and reap the benefits of all of the hard work that they're doing.
Yeah. So watching the Olympics and hearing what you're saying right now, and knowing that you've studied a lot about Norway and seeing their medal count, what do you think is different, or what can we learn from that, from Norway?
Yeah, so I am a Norwegian citizen now, and I want to speak really fondly of my adopted nation. They do win more Olympic medals than anyone else by far. I attribute a large portion of that, especially in winter sports, to culture, which I don't think can be exported. So, for example, on Sundays here, everything is closed. Like you can't go shopping or buy anything. There's not a whole lot to do. So families recreate and they do sport together, starting when their kids are really young, before they can even walk. They're off skiing in the forests, and they're hiking, and they're biking, and they're doing challenging outdoor things together. Norwegians, like, they even roller ski for fun here in the summer. And that's not just like the top athletes, it's, 50-year-old men and 20-year-old recreational cross-country skiers. So that's a little bit of the culture that I think drives that success. But I think in the context of what you're asking, what is even more important to note here is that Norway had 41 medals in these games, but only 31% of those were awarded in women's competition. And if we look at the US, that medal haul was 33, but that was supported by over 51% earned in women's events. So maybe on the support for girls and women in sports side, Norway could learn a thing or two from the US.
That is right. Yay. The cultures, that's a really big point about culture. And I think what we don't do so well in the US is really emphasize adult participation, especially on the women's side, just getting out there and cross-country skiing or downhill skiing or ice skating, whatever it is that you enjoy doing, and not finding the time to be able to do that, to take care of yourself. And I'd love to hear that. I lived in Sweden for a while, so I love to hear that those Scandinavian countries really know how to do that well. That's fantastic. Just on a coaching her side of this, we talk a lot about girls, helping girls feel seen, supported, and understood. So from your experience, which has been so vast, what are some of the small but powerful culture signals that communicate belonging, and what signals kind of quietly push girls and women out?
This is the exact question I want more people to be asking. So I talk to a lot of coaches of junior and development programs about being sensitive to comparison and being really careful not to create what we might call a competitive cauldron in girls' teams. And it's a tactic that I have seen work to some degree with boys. I think we still need more research to understand if that's healthy or how successful it is. But especially in an individual sport where the girls are training together in teams, it can be really damaging as a coach to identify any kind of hierarchy, pecking order.
Yeah.
And then as we see kind of the creep of professionalism into youth sports, this is becoming more predominant at younger ages. And I'm not a fan of that at all either, because I don't think it gives enough time and space for long-term athlete development needs to have that opportunity to emerge over seasons and years. So the idea that we need to create an inclusive, skill level, appropriate training and competition environment that's maintaining joy for the game and joy for the activity and the process. And then make sure that over time, that will demonstrate better long-term outcomes for teams and individuals, instead of being really short-term focused and looking at, even as narrow as a single weekend, right? Like if your team has a soccer tournament and you're like, we have to emerge with victory in this tournament. So how can I make sure I get the girls ready to head into that, space? Oh, let's pit them against each other in a 4v4 and really try to rile them up. I just haven't seen it work that well on the girls' side. So that inclusion piece, the participation, the group activity, and the dynamic of being a part of something together in a team seems to matter so much more to girls.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with that. We've tend to see that boys can do a little bit more hierarchical kind of team, but with girls, it's a little bit more woven. There's so much competition socially outside of sport that sport is their safe space, and personal competition is more important than competing against another girl. So I would rather do my PR than try to beat so and so because she's my friend. There's a different social dynamic there. And I think coaches do miss that a lot. And so that's a really great point that you bring up that I appreciate. And as those girls get older and they become adolescents, and we're really seeing that, we're missing those high school girls playing, what do you see there that is often understood but misunderstood by adults to keep them in those crucial years? Because we know if they play high school sports or that at least that age group, how much it benefits them for the rest of their life.
What you just mentioned is the piece that I unfortunately didn't connect to when I was more actively coaching girls' teams. And it wasn't until I had a corporate career after I stepped away from sport for a few years that I could really understand how keeping girls in sport is more about giving them an opportunity for lifelong career and financial stability than it is about the sport that they are playing in that moment, right? It's the skill set, it's the confidence. And, it was long after I was coaching women's teams that I came to understand how sort of like convincing the statistics are about the professional success of past female athletes. This is completely off the charts. It's undeniable. And I don't think enough parents also know that.
Yeah.
And that is some information that I think it's our responsibility to get in the hands of parents and have girls understand that if you step away from sport and we can't keep them in through the end of their high school years, that they may not, emerge with the same skills as some of the other former teammates. And that's what matters more to me, I think, from the coaching standpoint, is that you're working with girls who are teenagers, but you have to envision that's going to have an impact for the next, 10, 20, and 30 years of their lives. And that also gives coaches, I think, a bit more purpose in the space and takes the pressure off of being results driven or outcome driven in that specific sport in any given season.
Yeah. And I think that alone helps girls feel that they're welcomed and it's inclusive and that they care about them as a whole person, which is really important. And at Coaching Her, we really try to drive awareness. And we believe that's the first step of change, is trying to grow awareness for parents, for coaches, for leaders to understand the importance of girls participating. Yes, it's the right thing to do, but it's also a good growth strategy, right, for their organization to keep those girls in there. But it really does have a massive impact on those girls. So yeah, the awareness part of trying to teach it is hard. But again, that's what we're trying to help organizations as they become organizational champions to really build that awareness. So when you think about coaches in general, what kind of human coaching skills really stand out that coaches of girls need? Is it communication? Is it trust? Is it confidence building? What do you seem to have found over the years?
I don't think enough teams right now realize the significance of influence that communication, listening, and resilience building can have on performance. So it's not only the skills to run the team or to necessarily instill in the players that you're working with, but that there actually is a hardline impact on the success of a team and or an individual athlete. And if the teams realize that, I think we would see a lot more of a focus on it in the coaches' education curriculum.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest piece of the puzzle we're trying to take on at WWSO, are the soft skills and the human skills of coaching that are often overlooked when emphasis is placed on the physicality of sport and the technicality of sport. And from a club management perspective, like, it is far easier to retain your current athletes than to have to win new ones over to your sport.
Yeah.
So we really all should pay much closer attention to keeping those girls who are walking through our doors around through the high school graduation, instead of saying, hey, our numbers aren't working anymore, and now we have to go find more younger potential, recruits to join our team or join our program. Like once you have them, just do whatever you can to hold on to them.
Yeah. And I would say, even on top of that, what we've been trying to communicate out is you have them, let's start developing them into leaders, because you want more women coaches, you need more coaches that look like your community. Develop those young women and those girls into coaches and the leadership pathways to keep them in the game. So I think that's wonderful. And as you think about all of this and you're putting it all together and you're in the media side, which is fascinating to me, how do you think media is portraying these girls? How do you think they see themselves right now in media? And is it changing?
It's maybe because I used to work in media. I have a real problem with armchair quarterbacking journalism. And some of the content that was produced, like specifically regarding Lindsey Vonn and Michaela Schifrin early in these Olympic Games, was the worst of this. I think when you're in the arena, like Theodore Roosevelt quipped, there's a lot of compassion and understanding for what is actually going on in the sport.
Yeah.
And I wish that news outlets and media had any idea of the power that they have to be spreading positive messaging that would uplift and inspire future generations instead of chasing clicks. But, their business models are also taking a hit right now. And the more that we feed those sensational stories and the stories of disappointment and the stories of expectation, the more they're going to produce them. So, the best spin on media right now is to use it to showcase the absolute utmost, success of our female athletes in what they're doing. And then that is going to light a fire in the next generation to want to continue to play as a result of that. And all that other noise that kind of gets in the way in the middle could probably go away, and we would do better without it.
What would you say when you think about an organization that is doing their own social media and their own news or their local area? How does that impact? Could they make different choices in how they portray their girls?
I'm trying to think of a good example here, but I'm always seeing the vast potential of content production to be doing exactly what you're saying. And I think it's underinvested in and underutilized. Of course, small teams and clubs, budgets are always tight, but to find a college student or somebody who was past connected to your program and give them the opportunity to run your social media accounts and build a portfolio, right? And have the full creative freedom to kind of get the interesting camera angles or capture what's going on with your teams. That I think could be used in order to recruit, I use recruit lightly. I don't mean it as like an NCAA term or a professional sport term. I just mean find more people that are looking for clubs that have the same values that you have. Yeah. Right. I do tell like NCAA teams this a lot, that showcasing the experience of what it's like to be on your team versus another school that's your competitor that maybe offers a different academic program, has maybe a different training schedule, doesn't have exactly the same culture. If you can sort of capture that video and that demonstrates culture, that shows everybody eating a meal together, that shows them traveling together to whatever competition or game that they have, and you really get a feel for what it must like to be a part of that, that could potentially increase the number of applicants that a school gets or interest that an NCAA team has. I think the same model applies for grassroots level.
I never really thought about that, but that is really brilliant because we do need to meet girls where they are, and we experience sport differently. I mean, you go do a women's professional basketball game or hockey game, and it's a different crowd there, right? And you see on social media sometimes when they do colleges how women celebrate the game versus sometimes men. So I think celebrating them on social media in their own way, and then that would really resonate with the community to be like, I want to go there. So I think you make a really good point there. I just have one more question for you, and that is for organizations that really want to support more women coaches and leaders, because that's the number one question I get is how do we get more women leading? but aren't sure where to begin. Do you have some practical steps, like first steps that you've seen, experienced, that you would share?
If an organization already has enough sort of senior leaders who are women that have a little bit more spare capacity, setting up a mentorship program within your own organization is a pretty obvious first step. But of course, we both end up working with a lot of coaches where they are the only one, they
Yeah.
are the only leader or the only person that's interested in that. And to that extent, I really want to encourage more organizations to think long-term and strategically about this and create a professional development fund and share that opportunity and information with your staff and help them find events and organizations that will educate and inspire them to continue to do great work. At WWSO, we have an annual women's summit that we hold in Kaprun, Austria. And last year we brought together 55 leaders from women's sport. Almost universally, the sentiment that people walked away with was like, oh, I was feeling pretty drained at the end of my season and like questioning how much more I wanted to give or how much longer I wanted to do this because I feel very isolated or I kind of lost the spark. And we had them for 5 days together talking about all these, important but uplifting topics and just being in community with other like-minded women. They all walked away saying, I am now inspired to elevate to a new level in the organization that I'm in. And I'm committed to next season and seasons beyond. And that gave me enough. It filled up my cup enough that I'm going to show up next year as my best self.
Yep.
So I think that these types of events and professional development opportunities are first underutilized and second under financially supported. So, think long-term as an organization when you're doing your annual fundraising, earmark a certain amount that's going to go towards, staff development, and then make even a more specific earmark portion of that for your women's staff.
Yeah. And I will say that there's a 33% retention rate higher for girls if there's a woman coach. So there's a lot to be said about that. We totally agree at the Tucker Center that getting women together really fills the tank. And I can't recommend it enough to try to, whether it's a small group of women you're pulling together or it's a large event, but just it fills their tank, and their tank does get completed if you're one of the only women in an organization. So yes, thank you for that. All right, so let's talk about some of your upcoming events, because I think this is really great for women to have the opportunity to come do this. Would you like to share?
Sure. So I kind of already talked a little bit about our global summit that's in Austria. And anyone who's interested can learn more about that at wwso.pro. And then we've also been lucky enough to collaborate on an event in Whistler Blackcomb, Canada, with the Professional Ski Instructors of Canada, PSIC. And that is a women's snow sport leadership conference. So we're targeting individuals that are working across snow sports and also in mountain management. And that looks at both how to build environments to increase the retention of girls and women in programming, and then also how to attract and retain women in your snow sports workforce. And that's March 11th to 13th in Whistler Blackcomb. For anyone that's kind of close there and can maybe drive up or drive over.
Oh, it's worth a trip.
I don't know. It's Whistler.
Yeah.
It's Whistler. So, and the registration for that is on psic.pro is where individuals can register for that. And then we don't have details quite now, and it's a very select amount of individuals who would be going to this, but I do think that we're going to solidify a partnership with the International Ski Federation, the FIS, because they have women coaches seminars that they offer to their national ski associations. And they have asked us to support with some content on women specific coaching. So it's a big win for WWSO to partner with an organization of that size. And we are really excited to bring some of the Coaching Her content into that space. So I have to say thanks to Alicia and the whole team there for, creating what I think is an amazing framework that's really digestible and really simple. And then we take that material and we just expand it into the specifics of what it means for alpine ski coaching and in our unique environment, and use all of our experiences in order to build on that. So thanks.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, it was so nice talking to you today, Christine. Again, we'll post how you can sign up. Thanks for sharing with us today. And remember, be your reason to stay in sport.